Hey viewers, I'm back with a very interesting topic. Ragdoll physics are an area where vanilla New Vegas doesn't do too badly. There's far newer games with similar or worse ragdolls. Still, like always, there's room for improvement by using mods. Unfortunately, while I was looking at mods to review, I soon realized that there's only one good option, and I also began noticing some problems with New Vegas' physics that overshadowed what I originally intended to do with this video. While New Vegas Tick Fix solves game speed being tied to frame rate and lets us play above 60 FPS, there remain a few minor physics issues at high frame rates. The most noticeable issue is with turrets, not ballistic ceiling turrets, but the floor-mounted laser turrets. At around 150 FPS or so, they can start to rotate erratically. This effect worsens and affects a greater percentage of turrets the higher the frame rate goes. At 165 FPS, only the turret on the left in H&H Tools is affected, but at 300 FPS, both turrets are. At 480 FPS, things look even worse. It's not all bad though, the lasers still continue to fire normally as this only seems to be a visual glitch. Sadly, the issue isn't confined to turrets. At higher FPS, you'll notice ragdolls occasionally have this initial upward bounce. It is most evident when you kill enemies while they're crouching, or doing certain animations like sleeping or kneeling as captives. My theory is that when ragdolls initiate while their bones are colliding with each other or another object, that the higher the frame rate is, the more starting force they get. You can already see it a tiny bit at 30 or 60 FPS, and it just gets worse the higher the frame rate goes. The problem is often disguised by weapon force pushing bodies away, but removing kill impulse or using laser weapons that have no impulse to begin with makes the difference more obvious. And these behaviors are even more prominent during slow motion VATS kills. In fact, setting the timescale to something like 0.1 will make ragdolls act jumpy even at 60 FPS. So there's a link between frame rate and timescale I don't entirely understand, but suffice it to say, the higher the frame rate and lower the timescale, the more screwed up physics get. Even so, 95% of the time there is no observable difference between high and low FPS, but that last 5% gets on my nerves a bit. Creature ragdolls fare even worse than humans. Sentry bots and Night Stalkers in particular already have a tendency to launch or flip around at 60 FPS, and higher frame rates just exacerbate that. However, some creatures like dogs never go flying even at over 300 FPS, so it really depends on the skeleton. Those are the problems, but is there any solution? Well, the most simple fix is to stick to 60 FPS, which a lot of people are happy with, and if you're using NVR, you likely don't have a choice anyways. But to me, the benefits of higher frame rates, namely better motion clarity and less input lag, outweigh these relatively minor physics issues, and I have a few tips to mitigate them. First, you need to make sure you've got slow motion physics fix installed. In addition to helping physics not go completely crazy at lower timescales, it also seems to reduce the physics insanity at high FPS. It doesn't come close to solving the problem completely, but I think it helps, and there's no reason not to use it since it can only have a positive impact no matter the frame rate. Next up, you should install Ragdolls. Now, Ragdolls has many reports of crashing, especially for Tale of Two Wastelands users, and I myself had frequent crashes when loading quick saves until I updated to the very newest versions of JIP-LN and Johnny Guitar NVSE. I haven't had any crashes since, but I've only been running around and testing this shit for 15 hours, so I can't say for certain the whole mod is safe. If you're wary of Ragdolls and don't trust it, I don't blame you. As an alternative, you can install just its meshes instead of the full mod because the meshes are the main benefit. With only one exception I could find, Ragdolls' skeletons are better than vanilla ones. Ragdolls makes most creatures fall much more naturally, with the weird flipping and bouncing largely fixed. Laser turrets are also fixed even at 480 FPS. Ironically, Ragdolls went and broke ceiling-mounted turrets though. At high FPS, those will start going crazy instead, but this can easily be fixed by hiding the mini sentry turret skeleton NIF in Mod Organizer 2, or just deleting it so the game falls back to the vanilla skeleton for ceiling turrets, while still using Ragdolls as improved skeletons for everything else. If you choose to use the ESM, you'll benefit from momentum conservation and hit reactions, which work well at any frame rate, although hit reactions become less intense the higher the FPS goes. Even at 60 FPS, they are much more subtle than I remember. Oh well, not a big problem. Bigger issue is the main feature of the ESM, amazing Euphoria-style death reactions, is broken at high FPS. A high frame rate makes NPCs tense up more and grab their body parts for far too long when hit by melee weapons or with automatic weapons. It often looks like they're puppets attached to a string. It does sometimes look bad at 60 FPS too, but at 120 and above, nearly every death reaction looks terrible. So if you're playing above 60 FPS, you need to set death reactions to simple or none in the MCM to have a good experience. Of course, if you're playing at 60 FPS, definitely keep it on complex and enjoy the incredible active Ragdolls. If you want to have complex reactions and a high frame rate, I discovered installing Death Throes Reactive Ragdolls on top of Ragdolls, but excluding Death Throes' ESPs produces less pronounced reactions that still look decent around 200 FPS. Although I find Death Throes' Ragdolls a bit too stiff. Sometimes you'll see NPCs die standing upright, which doesn't look good to me, but it's all up to personal preference. I wouldn't recommend using the ESP from Death Throes, as although it works okay at high frame rates with only occasionally questionable reactions, it affects game balance by making NPCs ragdoll when they get crippled. Also, you have to make certain you only load one of the two ESPs. One is named knockdowns, but they both cause knockdowns just the same, so it doesn't really matter which one you load. But if you make the mistake of loading both, death reactions will double up, and it will look like every NPC is having a seizure when they die. Even with only one ESP loaded, I don't like how every single body twitches. If it respected the percentage in the MCM and I could set it to happen only 50% of the time, I might like it. But again, this is all subjective. You should try it for yourself and see which option you like the best. The only other issue I noticed with Ragdolls, either version, is at high FPS, bodies will occasionally shoot off into the stratosphere when hit with automatic melee weapons like the chainsaw, and I'm not sure if there's a way to fix that aside from not loading the Ragdolls ESM. Thing is, I rarely use the chainsaw or ripper, so I personally don't care since it doesn't bother me. As for other mods, I don't see them as viable alternatives to Ragdolls. Fetal Position Skeleton is okay, but Ragdolls is better, and I couldn't find any other mods that meaningfully improve creature Ragdolls, so I think Ragdolls is again the only option here. One last thing, if it suits your taste, you can download the recently released Ragdoll Pinning by the same author as Ragdolls, which works perfectly at any frame rate and makes it very fun to use throwing weapons, as they now stick enemies to nearby walls. Unfortunately, it's incompatible with B42 retrievable throwables, so you'll have to decide whether getting your throwing weapons back or impaling your enemies on them is more important. Oh, also, unless you're using Death Throes Reactive Ragdolls, ensure you install New Vegas Compatibility Skeleton and let it overwrite every other human skeleton so you can maintain compatibility with all the big popular mods like B42 Quick Throw or this furry crap. And that's pretty much all you can do as of right now. With these mods, New Vegas is going to have better Ragdolls than 99% of games out there, so I'm pretty satisfied. The small physics issues that still exist at high FPS will hopefully eventually be patched by NVTF or some other mod, but even if they never get fixed, it's not a game-breaking problem. The biggest annoyance is the turrets, and I showed you how to fix that. So, in case you need a summary, here is what I recommend. If you play at 60 FPS, use slow motion physics fix, Ragdolls with the mini sentry turret skeleton hidden, Ragdoll Pinning if you want it, and New Vegas Compatibility Skeleton. If you get crashes, try the turret fix mods, I'll link in the description, and if it still crashes, unload Ragdolls' ESM and just use its skeleton files because they will be an improvement. For above 60 FPS, either use the same mods but set death reactions to simple, or alternatively add Death Throes Reactive Ragdolls and uninstall New Vegas Compatibility Skeleton. Load one or neither of the former's ESPs at your discretion. If everything works, you'll enjoy significantly more brutal and intense death reactions, which is hopefully what you want. Otherwise, I just wasted 9 minutes of your life with this shitty video. Toodaloo!